Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Anna, and I'm going to tell you about my project on using a collective database to increase theater students' sense of empowerment and belonging. To give you a little bit of background, in my program, we are all assigned to teach an introductory research and writing course for freshman theater students, which we design according to our own expertise. And my expertise is puppet theater. So this project started when I was trying to find sources to add to my syllabus that went beyond the traditional Western canon and expanded on the artists, scholars, and puppetry forms represented. An important thing to know is that the scholarship about puppetry is often hidden. It is not always accessible in usual research databases. It sometimes exists in non-traditional academic formats such as videos, audio interviews, and some of it is not available in English. So all these factors got me thinking that these circumstances might actually make for a great opportunity to build students' sense of empowerment and ownership of the materials by inviting them to use their own interests and expertise with technology, languages, etc., so that they would be involved in the creation and evolution of the canon of puppet scholarship. So these ideas led me to develop the following research questions. Would contributing to a database of sources increase the student's sense of empowerment? Would students perceive the field of puppet scholarship to be inclusive and diverse after contributing to and engaging with the database? Would students see themselves represented in the field of puppet scholarship? So here's a picture of the database I set up. I created a form to populate the database, and I asked students to add the sources that they use for their various assignments throughout the quarter. Students could access this database so they could make use of the resources that their peers added. And then to gather data, I had students complete a post-course survey, which I developed and adapted based on the music model, which is a questionnaire to measure motivation, and an instrument developed by Connecta et al., which measures sense of belonging. In the spring quarter, I also gave an abbreviated questionnaire to students at the beginning of the quarter. So before showing you the results, I just want to acknowledge that the class I taught was pretty small. I taught it twice. In the winter, I had 13 students, and in the spring, there were only 8. But here are the results I obtained in answer to my first research question regarding student sense of empowerment. Students gave these responses at the end of the quarter, and quantitatively, the results show that for the most part, students felt they had freedom and control in terms of how to engage with the materials and achieve the course objectives, which is all of this is agreement, basically. I asked students to elaborate on their sense of empowerment by asking them how much control they felt they had over the materials they engaged with and why. And here are some examples that show the range of responses that I got. So a few students expressed feeling not having much control because of the syllabus, like this one at the bottom, but the majority talked about feeling like they had a good level of control because the assignments allowed them to choose their research topics and they were able to engage with the materials in different ways. I also asked students about their engagement with the database and found some interesting responses. So here you can see that students in the spring quarter, which are below, engage more with the database than their peers in the winter. And this makes a lot of sense considering that students in the spring quarter could see the resources that their peers had added the previous quarter, and that rendered the database more useful. So when I asked students to let me know why they looked at the database or how they felt it helped them succeed, they gave pretty broad responses. Because of the individual nature of the assignment, some students reported that there wasn't a lot of overlap between the resources that they needed and the resources that they found in the database that their peers had added. But this changed a bit in the spring, as you can see by the answers here at the bottom. I also asked students how much they cared about others' contributions to the database and how much they thought others cared about their contributions. In the winter, students believe other students did not really care about what they contributed to the database, although they did care about their peers' contributions, which I thought was interesting. But in the spring, you can see also that this changed and students care more about what others contributed to the database and believe that other students care more about what they were contributing. In both quarters, the responses to why they chose those numbers are interesting. So here you can see some examples. To me, what these responses suggest is that even the winter quarter students that didn't report feeling the database was very useful had a sense that there was something about it that was helpful or important, although it seems that they're not able to express exactly in what ways or what encouraged them to feel this way. So I don't know exactly how much the database contributed to this, but students did feel a sense of empowerment in the class. And this is important because I am connecting the sense of empowerment with the idea of disciplinary identity. So in STEM, disciplinary identity is pretty well studied, and research suggests that a big part of it is that it is tied with a wider social identity. So for example, if I am studying medicine, I will eventually be a doctor, and then that is part of my identity and my disciplinary identity. In the humanities, however, it is harder to translate disciplinary identity to social identity. As argued by Chance, the sense of disciplinary identity in arts and humanities requires students to develop a sense of how this disciplinary identity connects to identities that they have in other social domains. So scholars like Dyke et al. And Mast speak to the predominance of white Western-centric canons in the arts and humanities. And in light of the discussion about disciplinary identity, I think then it is important to highlight the negative role that the predominance of these canons, which exclude a lot of students play. These canons mean that not all students are able to see social aspects of their own identity reflected in the field, and so they might find it harder to make that connection required to develop a disciplinary identity. So by providing students with a sense of empowerment, I hope that they would get a sense that they were contributing to curate a canon where they could see aspects of their diverse identities represented. To answer my second research question, I inquired about students' perception of the field of puppet scholarship as inclusive and diverse. And here is a comparison of responses from students in the spring quarter, where they saw theater scholarship on whether they saw theater scholarship representing diverse identities. So what you see here at the top is what they answered at the beginning of the quarter. And note that I asked about theater scholarship more broadly because before the class, I had no way of knowing how familiar they were with puppet scholarship. So as you see before the quarter, the majority of the responses lean towards a lack of diversity represented in the field. And this changes in the post-class survey where they are able to see more diversity represented. But at the end of the quarter, I also asked students to speak about how they saw representation in puppet scholarship. And you can see that they perceive puppetry as being more diverse than theater more generally. So theater is here at the top and puppetry is here. And then I asked them to explain the responses, and something very interesting happened. Because in some of the qualitative responses, some students sought to find an explanation for why they perceive puppetry to be more diverse than theater. And they often claim that because puppetry is older and present in many cultural traditions, that might explain the wider diversity in it. And I have highlighted here some phrases that show that perception, right? So it's like, it's an art form inherent in many cultures, it's an ancient art form, the immense amount of different cultural traditions of puppetry. So they're justifying that to explain the wider diversity they see in puppetry. But I have to tell you that this is not actually so. I don't believe puppetry is more diverse than theater. It is not present in more cultures, and it is not really an older tradition. So please keep this in mind as I will talk about the importance of this perception in my conclusion. To answer my third question, I directly asked students if they saw aspects of their identity represented by the artists and creators of the sources in the database. Though not all students answered this question, the vast majority stated that they did see elements of their own identity represent them. I asked them too if they felt comfortable to share how they saw or didn't see their identity represented, and here you can see some of their answers. So although I got a few responses, several of them speak to students seeing their identity and feeling engaged by the diversity they saw represented. So I know this is not a majority or statistically significant sample of my respondents, but I think this is something important to highlight. Because if strategies like these are not causing harm, I think the benefit that they provide even for these few students make it worthwhile to implement them. To conclude, although my results do not reveal how much the database itself contributed to students seeing themselves represented, I think this project overall speaks to the importance of working on truly diversifying our syllabi. As I mentioned before, I don't think puppet theater and scholarship are really more diverse than theater more broadly speaking. But students perceive this, and I think it was because of the diversity of sources, including artists and puppet forms that they encounter throughout the course. This does not preclude the need to work on ensuring that disciplines are more respectful and inclusive more generally, but it shows it is also important to reveal and highlight the diversity that already exists and is often unrecognized. This diversity cannot be something that we tack onto the syllabus. These authors and artists need to take a central place, and we need to integrate them in a way that positions them as on an equal footing as the white European and US canons. They are as important and as relevant. So I have heard peers before speak to the fact that diversifying our syllabi takes time and a lot of effort because it asks us to search and master scholarship that might be outside of what we ourselves learned when we started in the field and outside of what we know. And yeah, this is true, but that is why I think it is important to find strategies like this one that can help us increase our and our students' awareness of what is out there, and which brings students into the creation of new canons that display the existing diversity in the field. And I think this will help students know that regardless of who they are, they do belong. So thank you all, and thank you especially to Lauren Woods and Lisa Davidson, as well as the rest of the STAR team and my fellow STAR cohort for their invaluable feedback and support.